You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of singers and sound creators who are redefining what it means to make music with the voice. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Evan, and this week we are back with another episode from across the pond with Jon Smith. He is the director of vocal arranging with the Vocal Company and tenor in the legendary vocal group, the Swingles. He's got an incredible full circle story that I'm really excited for you to hear.
And without further ado, Mr. Jon Smith.
Hello, we are here today with Mr. Jon Smith. We're having a little deja vu round 2 action. A very kind man in London stole Jon's phone and computer, so we're here with our second go around. But we're happy to be talking to Jon. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. What's your first memory of doing something musical?
I would have to say, watching my brother doing a musical was like the first time I knew. It's like, oh, I want to do that. And for a while, I really wanted to do musical theater. I started taking piano lessons, which didn't last very long, and I hate my younger self for not sticking with that. But yeah, I did a lot of choir and theater and stuff at quite a young age. Yeah.
Were your parents playing music at home? Were you what were you listening to that was like wanting to make you musical?
Oh yeah. So my dad, I attribute my music taste to my dad. He used to play a lot of Motown, Stevie Wonder, The Supremes, Jackson 5, yeah. And that's still to this day my favorite genre of music. And I will say, bias, it's like the best. Yeah. Period of pop music there ever has been, and it definitely shapes sort of my sound today for sure.
Yeah, that's a very good period of music to be raised on.
Were they musical people? Were they playing instruments? Were they performing as well?
So my dad is extremely musical. We'll pick up any harmony or just bust out a bass bar and just be super musical, has this amazing whistle with all of this vibrato. And I always get mad at him, Dad, you never did anything with that. You have such a talent. He has such a good ear, and yeah, but never did anything with music. My mom has a nice voice as well. It was basically my siblings that did choir and stuff like that. That was kind of the only thing directly in my family.
Older?
Yeah, my siblings are 8.5 and 9.5 years older than me.
Oh.
I was a mistake. A happy mistake.
So you'd mentioned last time that it very quickly became clear that music was the thing that you're going to do. Did you kind of have any watershed moments that kind of made that turn from high school, middle school into college?
Not really. I kind of just always, there just wasn't another option really. Mm-hmm. I guess I went to a program called NISA in high school. It's the New York State Summer School of the Arts. And that was when I decided that I really wanted to be a choral director. And that's still my goal for sometime when I grow up. Yeah, I would say that was a huge shift in sort of wanting to be, on Broadway or do shows and stuff like that to, sort of more legit music.
So I'm sure a lot of that advises your decision to go to the University of Delaware. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So big music education program at Delaware. And it was great. I auditioned for a couple of conservatories as well. And basically all of them were like, yeah, you can't be in the opera the first year. You can be in one choir your first year, and you can't do a cappella. And I was like, okay, bye. I wanted to have the freedom to explore. And I think, a huge thing that formed my sort of style and voice today was being able to do opera and choral music and a cappella and jazz and sort of dip my fingers in all those things. So yeah, UD was definitely the right choice for me.
You'd mentioned that you were looking to be doing a cappella. What was the first exposure to that specifically?
Sure. Basically, I downloaded some stuff on LimeWire,
Hey.
and and one of them was the Folgers commercial by Rockapella.
Oh my gosh.
And a couple other ones were just like, I think random college groups, but they were all mysteriously named Rockapella as well because no one really knew better at the time. But from that, when I was a freshman in high school, I decided to form an a cappella group. And I ran that for 4 years. And basically sort of out of the sing-off and sort of watching other things happen while I was doing this a cappella group, my love grew for it more and more.
Mm-hmm. So you already had like some directing experience from high school then when you came into Vocal Point?
Yeah, I did. I was also arranging. I sort of just taught myself. I started by transcribing a couple things I'd heard. I used to sit alone on Friday nights and transcribe New York Voices arrangements. Very nerdy.
Out.
Once I figured out what people were doing and how arrangers were writing, then I sort of took a crack at some of my own and, did that.
What was your first arrangement?
It was, oh goodness. That song. If I lay here, if I just lay here, would you like it? What's that song?
Yes,
Chasing Cars.
Yes, Snow Patrol. Yes, that was my first arrangement.
Was that for your high school group?
Yeah. There's no recording of it anywhere, don't worry.
Oh, man. I was going to dig. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Vocal Point, directing and competing with them?
Yeah, sure. So I was lucky enough to know a few people at the University of Delaware before I came. My best friend, Ariel Klein, from high school, she was sort of the reason I got into, started looking at the University of Delaware. And she had a couple friends in Vocal Point, was like, you have to audition for this one. So I did. And, Vocal Point was interesting. Like, definitely not, sort of the most talented group on campus. I mean, there are a lot of good singers, but in terms of a group sound and in terms of sort of doing what was current, Vocal Point wasn't really up to date on all of that. But the thing I loved about Vocal Point is that, they're passionate and really hard workers. So basically, I started arranging for them my second semester. And we did this performance called Deloc, which is where all the groups on campus perform. And all of a sudden people were like, oh, Vocal Point's like kind of good. And I remember, everyone in Vocal Point sort of celebrating, being like, oh my God, people think we're good. And I was like, yeah, that's great. But the only way is up. We're not going to settle. We're going to keep working and working and working. And we did. And by my senior year, we got third at ICCA finals. So it was pretty cool to start from the bottom and then work your way up. Yeah. And I actually have a tattoo, The Only Way Is Up, and it's in my handwriting. It's sort of it's all about constantly improving and never settling.
That's awesome. I wish that you could see this, but it's a podcast, so you can't. So, sorry. Deal with it, I guess. So was that ICCA and everything kind of your entrance point into the a cappella community specifically, because you later do High End of Sound and stuff, and then obviously, went on to TVC. How did you what was your journey like kind of meeting people and beginning to start to do some arrangements for not just Vocal Point?
Yeah, so just before my senior year, just before we went to finals, I actually decided to sign up for Next Level Arrange. And I kid you not, it was an ad that came up on my Facebook. I had no idea what the vocal company was, no idea of Next Level. It was an ad that came up on my Facebook. I signed up, I paid the fee or whatever. And when I showed up, eventually Ben Stevens and Dave Longo told me this later, that they each thought it was a prank that the other one was pulling on the other one, that a student named Jon Smith just randomly signed up that no one knew. They were like, does he actually exist? So that was sort of, I met Tom Anderson and Hannah Giuliano and Chris Harrison. They were our teachers, and it was a really small Next Level. So it was just me, Dan Purcell, Johnny Del Toro, and Dave Grossman.
Good crew.
That's a
as the
great crew.
students. Yeah. It was a great crew. And basically that's how I started meeting people. And then the next year, I had auditioned for Highness Sound and got in, and I guess the rest is history.
So you've been in a lot of different groups. When you think about Hyannis, you think of the Swingles, think of Vocal Point, you think of Pulse.
You think of Pulse.
Everyone goes to Pulse first when we think Jon Smith. We always want to talk about Pulse. All of them with like very distinct styles and song choices. I'm wondering how you integrate your inspirations and your personal style, because it's still very clearly there from group to group, from arrangement to arrangement.
I guess it just comes from having such a diverse background of from my education. But I just like to take everything as something completely new. Like Pulse was so different from anything I was used to at all.
Right.
And we didn't write down any of the arrangements. And I was like, what? People do that? And it was awesome. And it was such a cool creative process. But I think, you know, your voice is always going to come through when you work on something. But it's just really important to let other people, first of all, it was about letting other people sort of add their voices in as well, because you learn a lot from that. But it's also not being afraid to take charge when you have an idea that you think is going to work.
Yeah. Like when you sit down to write an arrangement and say that hypothetically that you're given carte blanche to like do with it whatever you want to do, are there things that you like to do that to you make a successful arrangement, or that you just like, you know, are there obsessions that you have that you like to like sneak into stuff whenever you can?
Sure. Yeah. So I know it's kind of cliche, but the most important thing is the lyric for me. So making sure that every note and every sort of suspension and every chord sub, all of them have purpose, and they're done for a reason that aids the lyric and aids the telling of the story. I've actually gone into, you know, a lot of depth with some of my arranging students about my arrangements and showing them what certain things mean and certain dissonances and why they're there. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about it actually that deeply. I also love the use of themes. Actually, JD and I have this thing now where we kind of, he has a John theme and I have a JD theme. And we kind of sneak it into arrangements that we do for other groups that, you know, they'll have no idea it's there, but when it's released and either of us are to hear it, they'll be like, oh, he sang hello to me.
That's amazing.
Love that.
So Anthony had mentioned Pulse, and I think the fans want to hear what the deal is with Pulse. I think those two videos will live on forever. Can you kind of just talk about that time and what was going on with the group?
Yeah, sure. So Danny was moving to Sled Dog, the house up in Rochester, and had kind of mentioned on Slack, our company chat platform, the new season of The Sing Off was just announced, and they were looking for groups to audition. So he had mentioned doing an all percussion focused group. So Mel and I were like, oh, yeah, we're in, definitely. And then, well, who else better to have than Bijul? So we contacted him, and then he brought Elon along as well. And yeah, we basically talked about it for a while and then just decided, cool, we're going to meet up on this long weekend. We have no idea what this is going to be,
right?
But let's do it. And basically we showed up. We had no songs selected or anything. We basically just chose songs as we went, arranged them as we went, and then filmed them. We did have we did have one live performance.
Oh,
Oh,
Marlboro High School.
okay.
Shout out to Shannon McNulty.
Yep.
all right.
And yeah, we had a couple. I mean, the first NAC had asked us to do the professional showcase and America's Got Talent. We actually had a filming date for that, but basically just sort of went our separate ways and sort of fell off the course. It wasn't anyone's super main priority,
Right.
as we were all working and doing other projects and stuff. I mean, I would love to, do another project with them here or there. That would be so cool.
I think
But yeah, it was amazing for what it was, and working with Mel and Bijal especially. There are a few people that I've really connected with on that sort of creative level, and it was really cool to work with them.
Yeah, I feel like, especially now. I mean, back then, I feel like it was like there was a more focus on like dubstep and this kind of electronic thing. But I don't know. I think music now, it's like multiple VPs and stuff. Like I still think that there's like a big place for that in the way that pop music is produced now. So I don't know. Somebody else get on it, or somebody pay Pulse to get back together so we can get more of it.
There's actually a group here in London that does it. They're called the Beatbox Collective.
Oh yeah, no.
And they are pretty incredible. And the cool thing about them is that actually most of them are very much like competitive beatboxers first. Like they can do all those crazy amazing sounds. We actually did a little bit of a jam with them at the last LACF, and they're really great.
Is that the group Ball Z is in? Do you know if that's?
Yes,
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah, they're legit.
Yeah, I think we all look forward to like hearing another group that's doing some like multiple percussion stuff. Like even then, Pulse felt like its own like thing that was a little ahead. And I think if someone still did something of their own direction, in those lines, I think people would still be all for it.
Yeah. Even when it was just the Nor'easters with Bijal and Kenji, that was like enough to like elevate the stuff. So I don't know, get on it.
Absolutely. So Focal Point, Pulse, Hyannis Sound. I think you had all these amazing formative experiences, especially with all the other ensembles you had at University of Delaware. Then you end up in the Swingles. Tell us about that process to being into one of the most iconic groups, I think, of all time.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's pretty much a dream job. I used to listen to the Swingles when I was 12. So it's kind of cool to say that I'm in the group. Basically, they put out a Facebook posting. And
shout out to Mark Zuckerberg.
I was living there.
He's making your
What's
career.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark Zuckerberg and Ted Trembinski, who shared the posting on my wall and said, "Hey, look, I found you a job." And at first I was like, I'm probably not going to get in. I shouldn't do that. And then I ended up doing it. I actually submitted my application late. But yeah, so after that, they asked me to submit some more recordings. And then I had to go over to London and sing some songs with them in the studio. And then after that, I did a little mini test tour with them. The whole process from submitting my application to getting the call that I got the job was 10 months long.
Wow.
So it's quite a long process, but it was definitely worth it. And yeah, I'm so happy that I'm able to have this experience.
Yeah. So for the uninitiated, what kind of is a brief history of the Swingles and everything that they are?
Sure. Yeah. So the Swingles, they were originally called the Swingle Singers. They were founded by a guy named Ward Swingle, and they sort of got famous by accident. Basically, they realized they could put these Bach fugues and this classical music to, they could swing it basically, and they added a drum kit and upright bass, and basically the first album they did was just for a Christmas present for their friends. And basically someone picked it up in America, and it was like they got famous overnight, and that's how they got their first 3 Grammys.
Sounds like a movie.
A few years later, Ward actually ended up moving to London, so he basically restarted the group with 7 new singers in London. And it's been going ever since. It's always one in, one out. Basically, the group has never disbanded. It's always been the same group. I think the cool thing about the group now is that it's evolved so much. At the time, the group was very much about being at the forefront of vocal music. No one was doing what Ward Swingle and the Swingle singers were doing. And we still try to keep that spirit today, which is why, we'll still do, 1 or 2 of the classics.
Right. Yeah.
But I think if we stayed doing that, it would become, sort of, I don't know, it would have died off by now. I think we needed to, we still do, we keep Ward's spirit of staying at the forefront of vocal music, which is why we're doing original music and all this live looping and music from all around the world, from corners of the world you never thought you would hear sort of music from, brought into this sort of contemporary a cappella scene. And that's basically where we are today.
Wow. So what was that transition like? Where were you before doing this, and like where did you find yourself changing into becoming like a Swingle?
Yeah, so I was living at Sled Dog for the first part of that process. I was finishing up as a production intern, and I had just started as director of vocal arranging, and then sort of decided I would move back to Delaware to sort of be a mid-Atlantic rep for the vocal company and do some producing and arranging. And that's sort of all I was doing at the time. I had rejoined my college choir because I needed some of that in my life, which was nice. But yeah, I pretty much was just sort of waiting around for the results before, putting down roots into anything concrete. And the transition of moving to London was difficult. Moving to a new country where you only really know a handful of people forces you to grow up quite quickly and forces you to become a lot more independent than you will have been previously. So yeah, it was a bit difficult at first, but now I feel like, it's almost home, and I have a really good group of friends here, and, I know lots of musicians outside the Swingles and have been doing other work with the universities here and the college groups and stuff like that. So it's gone well so far.
And now you've transitioned into constantly performing and making music.
Yeah, which was never the original plan, but I love it.
I know a lot of people are doing music on the side, as well as like maybe they have like they're doing education or doing not entirely writing and performing all the time. What's it like being a part of a performative group year round all the time?
It's amazing. You constantly get to sort of emote on stage and through performing, and you get to make other people feel and directly see that happening in front of you, and you get feedback right away, rather than sort of working from home on, producing or arranging and then sort of not knowing what the final product is going to sound like or how people will react to it till much later on. So performing, full time is awesome. But the nice thing about the Swingles is that I get to do all the other things I love as well. So I head up sort of our education branch. So if we have a school gig or part of the gig sort of agreement is that we'll do a workshop with local choirs. I'm usually, myself and Kevin are the ones that are heading that up. And I also obviously get to arrange for the group. And it's nice to have sort of all of my passions in one job. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. And speaking of like all your passions kind of intersecting, I think there's kind of this theme of in your career that pop music and classical, style and like less contemporary things have kind of come together into what Jon Smith is. Can you kind of talk to how that manifests itself within the Swingles and your work with them?
Yeah, sure. Well, I kind of like to describe my style as like a sponge, because I kind of just absorb everything around me and everything I hear and everything I'm listening to and inspired by at the time. I think the coolest thing, my sound has definitely changed since I've joined the Swingles. Part of that was the first album that we did, Folklore. Because we do a bit of pop, we do a bit of classical, we do a bit of jazz. The coolest thing was delving into this world folk music.
Yeah.
And hearing this music that, if you're sitting in your living room in New York, unless you're actively looking for it, it's not going to pop up on your Spotify Discover Weekly.
Right.
And I think hearing stuff from all around the world and being able to fuse those things together, I think that's what made the album such an awesome project for us. But I think that's also evolved all of our own sounds as well. I think it's needed for growth, for you to go out and experience music that you never would have heard of before. If you keep listening to the same kind of stuff, you're gonna keep regurgitating the same kind of stuff.
Right.
And basically then it doesn't go anywhere and your sound doesn't grow. So I do always try to, especially at next levels, I always tell my students, like, go find something new that you love that you've never heard anything like before.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested of like how, because with the group, not only like with Folklore are you doing songs, incorporating folk music from around the world, but, you're, like you mentioned, you're doing everything from fugues to like fully contemporary, an LP song or whatever. So like, but it all, to me, at least from my vantage point, is like all done very like respectfully, especially, as it comes to like other cultures and stuff. Like, what's like kind of the thought process when you're like working on stuff from, wherever it is and like making it your own while still, respecting that original thing that existed?
Well, we always do want to have that signature Swingle sound, which I think we do a pretty good job of. But part of that comes from, rather than trying to imitate, like there were a couple things that were proposed for Folklore that we were like, we can't really do that without sounding like we're trying to do something. Trying to imitate some sort of, music in that sort of, in a different culture. And it was important for us to, take elements of the music and then sort of bring our own spin into it rather than trying to do it exactly. And I think that's what makes our set so cohesive, is that rather than taking something that's so different and just trying to imitate it, obviously we just take the elements of it. And that's why, an Afghani folk song paired with a Fleetwood Mac cover works because they actually don't sound super different. You can tell that, there's different elements inside the musical structure. Yeah. But actually, in terms of the overall arc, it all has that same Swingle sound.
Totally.
What are some of those elements that you're trying to take out of like these different music cultures when you're like trying to figure out how do we integrate this style with ours?
I'll take, I guess, Buchimis specifically. That was a fiery dance. So it was all about, making it sound intense and fiery. Basically, Buchimis translates to hemlock, which is poisonous, obviously. So, Claire and Ed arranged that, and it was all about it being super up-tempo and intense. And we decided that was just more of a tone thing, that actually the arrangement was writing itself based off of the piece they were they were working on. But actually to get that sort of sound, it was more just of a tone thing and a forward singing sort of thing. And actually all of the syllables are similar to the stuff that we use in the fugues. So there's actually not that much difference across that board, but it was just more of a tone element. I guess it's the same thing when I approach different arrangements, is that I sort of try to find a couple of words I can use to describe what that song makes me feel or what I want the audience to feel. And then, cool, well, what does grief sound like?
Yeah.
And what does anger sound like? What does bliss sound like? And then sort of go from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I know for me personally, Lover's Desire, which is on Folklore, is like my favorite Swingles thing, which is like, I'll link it, go listen to it. It's just amazing what is done with like no words really at all from any culture. It's just pure music. So definitely check that out. For you, what's been your favorite thing that you've worked on or memory experience, having been in the Swingles for a couple of years now?
Ooh, can I have... Oh,
you could have multiple.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. In terms of stuff that was written before I was in the group, Singing After the Storm will never get old for me.
It's a good one.
Because, I used to show that to my friends in college and be like, oh, listen to this group. They're so amazing.
Wow.
And, I still get emotional singing it on stage. I'll sort of all of a sudden come to and be like, whoa, I'm doing this right now.
Yeah.
So that'll never get old. Hard Times Come Again No More was my first arrangement for the group. And it is still one of my favorite things to sing because it was sort of the first time I was able to be like, cool, this is mine, and I'm finally inserting a bit of my voice into the group. But I do have to say that our brand new song, which I arranged, Tokyo Sunrise by LP, which our new soprano Federica solos on, that's got to be my favorite. Especially being able to write something for her to, finally have a solo on, and she absolutely slays it. She sounds incredible on it. So I'm excited to release some content based around that, but I won't say any more.
All right.
Check out the Swingles Patreon if you haven't already. So we are nearing the end of this episode, but we're gonna end with our two questions that we asked. The first being, are there any trends or things that you're excited by in the vocal music / acapella sphere, or like what do you want to see more of in that?
I definitely want to see more of original music.
Yeah.
I think I can't stress enough how important it is to be able to put your own full voice into your music. It'll tell you so much about yourself, and you'll learn so much about your own voice and your group's voice and how you approach music and arrangements as well. It'll change your arranging style once you've actually written some original music. And again, like I said before, I really would love to see more of just different styles. That we've done the pop thing for years and years and years and years, and acapella is not about being popular. It never has been.
Yeah.
Pitch Perfect did well, great. That's all fine, but it's never going to be the world's number one genre. The thing that connects so many people to it is that it is the most human form of making music because you're only using your voice. And that's amazing, and that's what connects people to it. But not everyone listens to music for that reason. So I think we need to, sort of realize that there's more that we can do, and, stop trying to be the most popular group by doing the most popular pop songs that are out there right now.
Yeah.
Find other things that inspire you that you'll want to use to move other people. Or, like I said, original music, create those things
Yeah.
that will move other people. You'll find that there's so much more reward in that, and because you've actually put so much more heart into it, rather than being like, oh, this is the new Shawn Mendes song that we have to do. If you've actually gone out and found something that you really love and that has inspired you, chances are you'll put your whole heart into it, and it'll have a greater chance of moving other people as well.
Totally.
Definitely. And our last question, what's on the plate for you personally and for the Swingles?
Sweet. So personally, I'm currently working on a little album
Ooh.
of
Exciting.
just me, and that's cool. My goal is to have it done within a year. It's just in its early stages. I have a few arrangements. I won't give away any more information about that. But in terms of the Swingles, well, if you follow the Swingles, you'll see that we're very much on this video kick right now. We're trying to release a video every single month. We're doing that through the help of our Swingle squad on Patreon, and we're very grateful for them. And, we would love for more people to come on to that platform. But I'm really excited about the fact that we've just taken a new soprano, and hopefully by the end of the year, we will have appointed our new alto as well.
Yeah.
And, we've been, going through some lineup changes over the past year or so. So I'm very excited for, a new lineup of 7. And we've actually just had a rep meeting last week, and we're excited to write some new stuff.
Nice.
And some new arrangements. And it's actually the 10th anniversary of the London Acapella Festival this January. So we plan on having a ton of new stuff, but also celebrating the last 10 years. And there might be some special guests at our show. So yeah, lots of exciting things coming up. Huge U.S. tour in March.
Yeah.
So I know you have a lot of U.S. listeners. Look out for that. theswingles.co.uk/shows. And see if we're coming to your city. I'm really excited. I think it's like 4.5 weeks or something like that. So lots of places around the States, which I'm excited about.
Awesome. Lots of cool stuff coming up. Well, John, I think somehow we did better than last time, so I'm really happy about that.
Sweet.
Yes, thanks for doing it again.
Yeah, no problem.
And we hope that you join us next week for a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Head Voice. The song you're now hearing is Lover's Desire by the Swingles, which is one of my personal favorites. And a huge thank you to John for recording this episode, not once, but twice. And no thank you to the pickpocketer on the streets of London who took his laptop.
I think they're just trying to afford Spotify so that they can listen to our podcasts, but it doesn't help when they go out and steal our podcast away from our guests. But
a little bit of a contradiction.
A little bit counterintuitive. But yes, John has such a great story, and I'm so happy he got to share it with us, because it is so cool to hear this like cinematic circle of his journey where he got to sing with the group that he grew up listening to, which is really inspiring and fun for all of us.
Yeah, and not to be a new agey hippie about it, but I think he manifested the things that he wanted to achieve, and those are big dreams, but he made them all happen because he just worked really hard at it, which I think is an important thing for young folks and old folks alike to remember.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that, John. And speaking of making things happen,
segue.
Evan and Kayla are members of Birdland Avenue, as many of you know, and their album just came out. It's called Come Around. It came out this past Friday, November 9th. Please go check that out. It's a really great album, and you really don't want to miss out on it. is getting so much fantastic feedback, and you have to check it out.
That's very kind of you, Anthony. We did not pay him to say that.
You didn't pay me at all.
But to to longtime listeners of the show, I think it's a really, I don't know, it's an important album for me and Caleb because it integrates a lot of concepts that we learned and talked about on this podcast, and you can kind of see the influence of a lot of people that we, interviewed on this podcast, and I don't know, I think it's fun for that, and so I hope you guys like it, and if you want to talk about it with us, follow us on our socials. We're posting there. Rate and review us on iTunes. Not Birdland, but Head Voice, and reviews and ratings just help us get the podcast out to more people, which we really appreciate.
Dream big. Dream big, then dream bigger. Dream big, then dream bigger, then dream